The shift started like every other Tuesday, coffee from the machine on the second floor, the one that makes it too weak, and a badge swipe into the ops room at 2200. There were 3 of us on nights that summer, sharing the room with a wall of monitors and the humming of a server rack that never quite went quiet. Denver in August is dry, and the AC in that building kept the air at a temperature that felt more like a hospital than an office. We flew route patrols for a utility company, long, boring loops over transmission lines and substations east of the city, out past DIA, and into the empty grass south of Bennett. The drones we used weren't military. Big fixed wings with FLIR and a decent optical camera, plus a radar package for traffic awareness. Legally, we stayed under 400 feet and out of the restricted zones, but the flight paths clipped the edges of Buckley's airspace, and coordination with the tower was part of the job. That night, I had the Eastern Loop, standard 8-hour flight, 3 drones staggered, 1 operator each. My bird had been in the air about 90 minutes when I saw it. I was looking at the FLIR feed, half focused, half thinking about a text I hadn't answered yet, when a second heat signature slid into the corner of the frame. Not a plane, no strobes, no nav lights. It sat maybe 300 yards off my starboard side and a little above me, tracking parallel to my course. I checked the radar overlay. Nothing. The screen showed my drone in empty air. I switched to the daylight camera. There was a moon that night, close to full, and the ground below was a pale wash of scrub and dirt roads. The object showed up as a shape against the sky, darker than the night around it, but soft at the edges, like the camera couldn't decide where it ended. About the size of a small Cessna, but the wrong proportions. No visible wings. Longer than it was wide. I called it out to the room. Marco leaned over from the desk next to mine, took a look and said, "Traffic? Not on radar." "Balloon?" "Balloons don't hold course." He watched for a few seconds and then rolled back to his own station. Nights get slow, and weird things drift into your feed sometimes. Bird wakes on FLIR, reflected heat off silos. A hot air balloon with the burner off will vanish on thermal and reappear like a ghost. You learn to shrug. The ops room smelled like microwave dinner and dryer sheets. Whoever had been on before us had heated up something with garlic in it, and the smell had settled into the carpet. I remember thinking about that, absurdly, while I was watching the second heat signature on my screen, because this thing was matching my speed. Exactly. I nudged the drone into a shallow turn to the south, 5 degrees. The object drifted with me. Same offset, same altitude difference. I straightened out. It straightened out. I pushed the throttle down a notch, dropped from 90 knots to 70. It slowed with me. That's when the back of my neck started to feel warm in a way that had nothing to do with the AC. I want to be clear about something. I'd flown these patrols for almost 2 years. I'd had traffic scares, near misses with hobby drones. People weren't supposed to be flying at night. Once an actual medevac helicopter that didn't answer its transponder for a minute. Every one of those things eventually behaved like a thing. This one behaved like it was reading my inputs. I called Marco back over. He watched me test it. I climbed 100 feet. It climbed. I dropped 200. It dropped. He said, "Okay, that's not weather." I got on the phone with Buckley Approach, told them I had an unidentified contact in the corridor. No transponder, no radar return, holding formation with my aircraft. The controller was quiet for a second and then said he had nothing in my area either. He asked me to hold my current heading and keep the object in view. The problem was, I wanted to see it better. My camera had a zoom, but the autofocus kept slipping off it. Every time I tried to punch in tighter, the shape softened and blurred, like I was looking at heat coming off a road. Then I'd pull back and it would sharpen up again into that flat, dark silhouette. I decided to try to get behind it. I don't know why exactly. Part of it was habit. That's what you do when a plane won't identify itself. You get eyes on the tail. Part of it was that I wanted the camera pointed at whatever was pointed at me. I banked hard to port and cut the throttle, letting the drone drop back and to the side, giving up my parallel line. The object turned with me. Not a mirror turn. It rotated in place. I watched the silhouette rotate on my screen, the long axis swinging around to keep the same edge facing my drone, and then it was flying alongside me again, same distance, same altitude offset, like nothing had happened. Marco said, out loud, "What the hell?" I tried it the other way. Hard starboard, dropped altitude 100 feet, cut power. It pivoted, matched, held station. By this point, I had the shift lead standing behind me and the Buckley controller still on the line. The lead told me to bring the drone back toward home and keep the object in the frame if I could. I turned west. It came with me. Buckley put in a call. I heard bits of it from the other line. They were scrambling something out of Peterson, or at least tasking whatever was already up. I kept flying. The thing kept following. About 7 minutes into the return leg, the controller came back on and said an F-16 was inbound from the south. ETA about 4 minutes. I told the room. Everyone got a little quieter. For 3 of those 4 minutes, nothing changed. My drone at 90 knots, heading west, the object off my 3 o'clock, holding. Then, and I remember this because I was watching the clock on my station, at 3 minutes and change, it wasn't there anymore. No maneuver, no streak on the camera. One frame it was there, the next frame it was sky. I ran the footage back later, 10 times, 20. There's no motion blur. It doesn't shrink into the distance. It's present in one frame at 30 frames per second, and in the next frame the pixels where it had been are just moonlit sky. The F-16 came through the corridor a minute later. The pilot reported clear. They flew a box for a while, working with radar on the ground. Nothing. I brought my drone home, filed the incident, and gave a statement over the phone to somebody who didn't tell me who he worked for. We reviewed the tape as a team the next morning. The shift lead had already sent it up. On the daylight camera, the object cast a shadow. You could see it as a smudge crossing a dirt road when the geometry lined up. On FLIR, it had a heat signature, not engine hot, warmer than ambient, roughly the temperature you'd expect for a surface sitting in the sun during the day and cooling at night. It reflected the moon a little on the top edge, which is how I'd been able to see it against the sky at all. That was the thing that stuck with me. It wasn't a sensor artifact, it wasn't a bug in the software. Whatever it was actually there. Photons had bounced off it and come back to my camera. It had displaced air. It had thrown a shadow on the ground. And nothing on radar had ever seen it. For about a week after that, we all waited to hear something. Then 2 weeks, then 3. The company sent someone from the safety office to interview each of us separately, and I told the story again. He wrote things down and didn't ask follow-ups. He was pleasant about it in the way that told me he'd already been told what the answer was going to be. The answer came a month later, almost to the day. A short email, forwarded to me from our operations manager, from a liaison at what I assume was a defense office, though the header was scrubbed by the time it hit my inbox. Contact of August 17th identified as prototype private sector unmanned aerial vehicle. Operator identified and contacted. Matter closed. The name of the company was redacted. There was no incident number I could look up. No FAA notice went out. Nothing appeared in any of the industry newsletters that usually pick up prototype crashes or airspace violations. I wrote back. I kept it short and polite. I asked 2 things. How did a civilian prototype end up inside restricted airspace with no coordination? And why didn't it return on any of the radar systems in the region? I never got a reply. I asked Marco, months later, if he'd been contacted separately. He said no. He was more rattled by the whole thing than I was at first. But by the time I left the company, he barely wanted to talk about it. I don't blame him. I flew the same loop for another 6 months before I moved to a different job. Every time I came into the corridor east of DIA, I checked my radar overlay a little longer than I needed to. Nothing ever showed up. I don't know if that made me feel better or worse. I still have the footage on a drive at home. The company let me keep a copy. I don't watch it much. When I do, it's for the part just before it disappears, because I keep thinking there'll be one frame I missed, some hint of where it went. There isn't. It's just there, and then it isn't, and the sky where it had been looks exactly like the sky next to it. I worked plastic surgery in a private clinic off Brickell for about 7 months before I started paying real attention. Before that, I was just grateful for a job that paid cash bonuses on top of the paycheck. In a city where a 1-bedroom near the water eats half your salary, the clinic was small, 2 operating rooms, 1 recovery suite, a consult office with a fish tank the size of a coffin. Ficus trees in the lobby, that kind of Miami money place where the front looks like a spa and the back looks like a hospital. The surgeon who ran it, I'll call him Dr. M, was the kind of guy who wore Loro Piana sneakers to work and drove something Italian he parked in his own labeled spot. Nose jobs, facelifts, chin implants, jaw reduction. He was good. I've worked with better hands, but not many. I was a scrub nurse. My job was to keep the field sterile, hand him what he needed before he asked, and count every sponge, every needle, every blade. I liked it. If you're doing it right, nobody notices you. I started noticing the second track of patients around the end of August. They didn't come through the main schedule. My friend at the front desk, Yanni, ran the system, and she'd told me once that certain files were locked to her login. She rolled her eyes about it, said it was rich people stuff, celebrities, wives of politicians from down south. VIP. The word came up a lot. The VIPs came in through the back. There's a service entrance on the alley side, behind the dumpsters. They came at odd hours, 6 in the morning, 9 at night. Once on a Sunday, when the clinic was supposed to be closed and I'd only come in to grab a jacket I'd left. The paperwork on them was thin. First name only, sometimes not even that. No insurance, but cash pay is normal in aesthetics. No next of kin, no primary care contact, no photo ID in the chart that I ever saw. Consent forms signed with initials. Dr. M signed as witness. I didn't think much of it at first. Discretion is a whole industry in Miami. What started to bug me was the work itself. Normal cosmetic surgery is subtle. Even a big rhinoplasty. Done right, you shave a few millimeters, you refine a tip. You don't rebuild the face. What Dr. M was doing on these VIPs was rebuilding. I remember one man, maybe 40, thick neck, a scar on his left forearm shaped like a hook. When he came in, his jaw was broad and square. His nose was heavy with a bump. His brow sat low over the eyes. 6 hours later, he had a narrow jaw, a straight thin nose, a lifted brow that made him look 10 years younger, and more importantly, like a different man. We did it all in one sitting. 12 hours. My back was on fire. The anesthesiologist, a quiet guy named Rafa, changed out halfway through with someone I'd never seen before. A woman with a Brazilian accent who arrived, worked her shift, and left without signing anything I saw. The recovery was where things got strange. Normally for a big facial job, you keep the patient in-house for at least a night, and you see them again at 1 week, 2 weeks, 6 weeks. You take photos. You watch for hematoma, for infection. It's your reputation. These patients were gone in under 12 hours. No follow-up on the books, no photos in the file, or if there were photos, they lived somewhere I couldn't access. I never saw any of them a second time. I started keeping a mental list, not writing it down, just remembering. The hook scar man. A woman in her 50s with a tattoo of a swallow on the inside of her wrist. A younger guy who spoke Russian to the second anesthesiologist and had a chipped front tooth Dr. M capped as a courtesy. A skinny man who kept his eyes closed the whole time he was awake, like he was already practicing being someone else. The turning point was a slow Tuesday in early November. I'd stayed late to reorganize the supply closet. Yanni was already gone. The cleaning crew wouldn't come until 11. I heard Dr. M in his office on speaker talking to someone about the package and clean by Friday. Package could mean implants. Clean could mean sterile. Then I heard him say 90, as in 90,000 for a face. 90,000 for a full facial reconstruction is not insane in Miami. What was insane was the next thing he said, which was, he needs to fly by Sunday, so no visible bruising by Saturday night. Understood? You don't heal from a facelift in 4 days. You just don't. The bruising alone takes 2 weeks to fade enough for a hat and sunglasses to hide it. Whoever this was, either they were flying visibly wrecked, or Dr. M was lying to a client, or the timeline meant something else. I finished folding gowns, turned off the light, and walked out through the front so he wouldn't know I was still there. That night, I sat on my balcony with a glass of wine I didn't drink and thought about the swallow tattoo on the woman's wrist. I'd seen a swallow like that somewhere before, not in real life. In a picture. I opened my laptop. I typed into Google, "woman wanted swallow tattoo wrist," and I felt stupid doing it. I got a lot of nothing. Then I tried the US Marshals fugitive site directly, then the FBI's, then a few of the state pages. I don't remember how long I clicked. Long enough for the wine to go warm. She was on page 4 of a state list out of Georgia. Not a household name, wanted for a wire fraud scheme that had bled a nursing home out of $2 million. The photo was 5 years old. Same eyes, same swallow. Faded, but the same. I closed the laptop and sat with the lid shut for maybe 20 minutes without moving. Tattoos repeat, faces resemble each other. But I remembered her voice when she'd asked me for a blanket in pre-op, a soft southern voice, and how she'd said, "Sugar, I'm gonna sleep so good after this." The next morning I went to work like normal. I smiled at Yanni. I helped Dr. M with a routine breast aug on a college kid from Coral Gables who paid with her dad's Amex. I counted the sponges. I signed my initials. Over the next 2 weeks, I did more looking. Not at work, never at work. At home, on my personal laptop, with the Wi-Fi off and the hotspot on my phone, because I'd read once that clinics sometimes monitor the network and I didn't know if that was paranoia or common sense. I found 2 more. The hook scar man matched a federal fugitive out of New Jersey, wanted on a RICO charge. The Russian speaker matched a name on an Interpol notice. 3 matches was not a coincidence. I could be wrong about all 3 and it wouldn't matter, because the pattern was the pattern. Cash, no ID, no follow-up, back alley entrance, a surgeon who could carve a new face in one sitting, and a boss who quoted 90,000 and a Sunday flight. I didn't tell anyone at the clinic. Not Yanni, not Rafa, especially not Rafa. He was too quiet, and quiet in a place like that means either scared or complicit. I started sleeping badly. Every shift, I was in a room where 2 of us knew what was happening, and the other 2 of us pretended not to. The night I decided to leave, I was scrubbing in for a case at 6 in the morning, a woman with a bandana over her hair who wouldn't make eye contact. Dr. M walked in, snapped his gloves on, and said, "Let's make her pretty." He said it the same way he said it about the college kid. Same tone, same little smile. I finished the case. I did my job clean. I walked her to recovery. On Friday, I gave 2 weeks' notice. I said my mother was sick, which was a lie I regret. Dr. M was gracious about it. He offered me a bonus if I trained my replacement. I said sure. I trained her for a week and a half. I taught her the counts, the layout, the way Dr. M liked his instruments. I didn't tell her anything else. I still think about that sometimes. My last day was a Wednesday. I turned in my badge, hugged Yanni, and drove home the long way, up along the water. On the third day after that, from a coffee shop in Fort Lauderdale I'd never been to before, using an email I made from a burner, I sent everything I had to the U.S. Marshals tip line. Dates, approximate times, descriptions of the 4 VIPs I was most sure about, the address of the clinic, the back door on the alley. I didn't sign it. I didn't say I was a nurse. I said I was a neighbor who'd noticed strange traffic. Then I closed the account, drove home, and waited. Nothing happened for a long time. Christmas came. New Year's. I got a new job at a surgical center in Aventura. Boring cases, board-certified people, actual charts. In late January, 2 marshals came to my apartment. Not aggressive. A man and a woman, both polite. They said they'd found me through payroll records at the clinic and wanted to ask about my time there. I made them coffee. I answered everything they asked honestly, for about 4 hours. They arrested Dr. M the next week. I read about it in the Herald. The article said federal agents had also detained 2 other individuals present at the clinic at the time of the raid. I gave a deposition that spring. My lawyer told me the case was strong and that I was the only person on the medical staff who'd talked. Rafa wouldn't. The replacement nurse wouldn't. I still work in surgery. I count sponges. I sign my initials. When someone comes in for a rhinoplasty and asks how long the swelling takes to go down, I tell them the truth. 2 weeks minimum before anyone stops looking twice. You cannot fly out clean on a Sunday. What actually saved that man's life wasn't the tox panel. It was where his friend kept looking. I was working overnight in the ER at a hospital off Tulane Avenue in New Orleans. April 2022, a Tuesday. Slow. We'd had a slip and fall and a chest pain that turned out to be indigestion. And I was actually eating a cold turkey sandwich at the nurse's station when the front desk buzzed us. I set the sandwich down. I never went back to it. 2 men had pulled up to the ambulance bay in a black SUV and were dragging a third out of the back seat. That in itself wasn't unusual. People bring their drunk cousins to the ER all the time in this city, especially in April, especially anywhere near the quarter. What was a little strange was that they didn't wait for a wheelchair. They walked him in themselves, one on each side, his shoes leaving 2 long scuff marks across the tile. He drank way too much, the taller one said. Like way too much. He was fine, and then he wasn't. He said it fast, like a line he'd rehearsed on the drive over. I registered it and let it go. The other one nodded a lot, maybe 40, clean-shaven, wearing a nice navy jacket that didn't fit the vibe of the moment. Both of them smelled like cologne, not alcohol. The taller one kept his hands in his pockets. He didn't touch Marcus once, not even when they set him on the bed. The patient, I'll call him Marcus, was in his 50s, heavy-set, gray at the temples, unresponsive to voice. Pupils were pinpoint, his breathing was shallow and slow, maybe 8 a minute. His skin had that waxy look you get from something more serious than a bottle of Jack. His fingernails were a color I don't like on a living person. I asked the 2 guys what he'd been drinking. Bourbon, said the tall one. Some wine before that. How much? A lot, like all night. Any chance he took anything else? Anything at all. I'm not gonna get anyone in trouble, I just need to know. They looked at each other for maybe half a second longer than a normal person would. Then Navy Jacket shook his head. Just the bourbon. I told them to wait in the family area down the hall and wheeled Marcus into Bay 4. Louise, one of our senior nurses, was already pulling the crash cart closer without me asking. She'd been doing this since before I graduated. She sees the same things I see, faster. The ER was quiet enough that I could hear the fluorescent hum over the monitor. Sats were in the low 80s and dropping, heart rate around 50, blood pressure holding, but not for long. I pushed a dose of naloxone in case this was opiates, even though the story didn't fit. Nothing. No change. That was my first real pause. Naloxone doesn't do anything for alcohol, but I threw it in anyway, and if he'd been sedated by any opioid, we would have seen a bump. We didn't. His breathing was getting worse, not better. Louise looked up from the ECG strip. This isn't a drunk guy, she said, quiet, like she didn't want the machine to hear. I know. We drew labs. Broad tox panel, lactate, ethanol level, LFTs, coags, blood gas. I intubated him around 11:55 because his airway was going and I wasn't going to lose him waiting on chemistry. Louise handled the sedation calm as a Sunday. Somewhere in the middle of that, Navy Jacket appeared at the curtain. "Hey Doc, sorry, is he doing okay? Just wanted to see." "Sir, please wait in the family area. We're working on him." "Right, yeah, sorry." He backed out. "I didn't think about it much. Families do that." Some people cannot sit still when someone they know is on a bed with tubes in them. The ethanol level came back first. 0.04. That's 2 beers. That is not, he was fine and then he wasn't. 0.04 does not put a 50-year-old man on a ventilator. I called upstairs to see if toxicology could rush the rest. While I was on the phone, Navy Jacket was at the curtain again. "Hey, I just wanted to ask if there's like a form or something we need to sign since we brought him in." "There is no form. There has never been a form." I told him, politely, no, and asked him to please wait with his friend. He nodded, looked past me at Marcus for maybe a second, and left. Louise waited until he was gone. Second time, "Yeah. Doesn't ask how he's doing. Asked about paperwork." I didn't answer. I was thinking about the ethanol level, and the pinpoint pupils that didn't move on naloxone, and the fact that his lactate was climbing when it had no business climbing on a drunk. Organophosphates crossed my mind. So did a couple of other things I didn't like. At 12:20, the tall one came in. Different guy this time. He didn't announce himself, just pulled the curtain aside a couple of inches and stood there. "How's he looking?" "Sir, I need you to wait outside." Right. He didn't move. His eyes were on the bed for a second, then they slid up and to the left, above Marcus's head, and stayed there. I watched him do it. He was looking at the monitor, not his friend, the numbers on the monitor. I'd been on this side of a bed for 6 years by then. I've had families ask me what the numbers mean. I've had them stand and stare at the pulse ox because they don't know what else to do with their hands. That wasn't this. This guy was reading the display like he was checking a scoreboard. His eyes moved between the heart rate and the SAT number, then down to the blood pressure cuff cycle. He was seeing whether Marcus was getting worse. He was checking his work. I said again, "Sir, outside, now." He left. I walked out to the hallway maybe 20 seconds after him, found Louise, and told her to page security. Not code, just security. I didn't want anything loud. I told her I wanted both of the men who came in with Bay 4 moved to the main waiting room, not the family area, and under no circumstances was either one of them coming back into a treatment zone tonight. Then I called the charge nurse and told her the same thing. 2 of our guys walked down and asked the men politely if they wouldn't mind waiting out front instead. Navy Jacket started to say something and then didn't. They followed the officers up the hall. I watched them the whole way. Neither of them looked back at Bay 4. At 12:45, the talks came back with something I don't want to say the name of here, because I don't want anybody reading this and getting ideas. It's the kind of thing that doesn't show up on a screen unless you specifically ask for it. The level was not survivable for someone Marcus's size without the airway support we'd already put in. It also wasn't a level you get by accident, not from a spill. Somebody put it in him, and they put in enough to be sure. Louise saw the number, sat down for a second, then stood back up. Neither of us said the word out loud. I called NOPD from the phone at the nurse's station while Louise pretended to chart next to me. 2 officers came through the sliding doors just after 1 in the morning. Neither Navy Jacket nor the tall one made a scene. Navy Jacket asked if it would be quick. The taller one didn't say anything at all. That, more than anything else, is what confirmed it for me. A guy whose friend has just been rolled into the back of an ER on a stretcher is supposed to be loud. He's supposed to be at the desk every 20 minutes asking questions. Silence is not a normal reaction from a friend. Silence is a plan. I stayed with Marcus. He didn't wake up that night. He didn't wake up the next day either. On the 3rd morning, he opened his eyes on his own, pulled at the tube, and we got him extubated by lunch. He was confused for a while, then he wasn't. He asked me later, when he was steady enough to talk, if I'd been the doctor working on him that night. When I said yes, he said, "The lady doctor." He didn't remember much else about that hour, but he remembered that. A detective came by that afternoon and sat with him for maybe 2 hours. I wasn't in the room, but I heard about it in pieces, the way you hear about anything in a hospital. The 2 men who brought him in had been his business partners. There was money involved, a lot of it, and a disagreement about where it was supposed to go. The 3 of them had been out to dinner at a place on Magazine Street. Marcus remembered the appetizers. He didn't remember the entree. Both of them got picked up that same night. Neither of them made it out of the parish jail on bond. I don't know what happened at trial because I moved to a different hospital in the fall and stopped following it, and honestly I didn't want to know the details. The thing that stays with me isn't the tox result. It isn't the intubation. It's the way that man's eyes moved when he pulled the curtain back the 3rd time. He didn't look at his friend. He didn't glance at his friend and then check the monitor, the way a scared person might. He walked in already knowing where he was going to look. He wanted the numbers. If you ever bring somebody you love into an ER, you look at them, you look at their face, you look at their hand on the sheet. You do not stand in the doorway and read the pulse ox like it's a stock ticker. When a family member gets a little too curious about a monitor now, I don't assume anything. I just make a note of it, and I make sure the curtain is drawn a little tighter than it needs to be. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today. Drop a comment and tell me which story was your favorite, or the one that creeped you out hardest. Don't forget to take a look at the other videos on the channel too. Catch you in the next one. Bye.